Okay, captive mission 4. Now we start actually in the base. I've literally just run into the base. I actually lost some of the fraps because I'm pretty stupid when it comes to basically figuring out how that works. So yeah, I lost about the first probably the first 10 seconds. So what I did is I ran straight into here because I had to go to the shop to basically get some ammo and fix some of my droids. And basically you can see I've ended up pretty much running for my life. So let's recap mission level 4. By this point we've got pistols, starting to find some kind of enemies that float. So my pistols, which shoot low, for some reason the droids can't literally angle up a bit and shoot up, so I actually can't hit them unless I have an anti-gravity unit, which means my droids suddenly walk on the ceiling, and oh my god, my brain hurts. This is so confusing. So yeah, basically for the first part of this video I'm pretty much running for my life, just trying to find a shop that sells an anti-gravity or something that sells something that can shoot high, or as you can see here, using a door to take these fools out. 4 times speed, so basically 20 minutes was really about just over an hour, I guess. But yeah, loving this game still, and it's you can see there are broken, I think, one of my legs, so I have to go and repair it very slowly. But yeah, I'm really loving this game still. I actually did something very nerdy last few days. I went on to a number of very shadowy websites trying to find some information on this once lost archaic game, and I've actually found a really good few websites that really go through some of the kind of details of the game, some of the bugs, certainly some of the issues. Apparently the PC version, which is what we're playing here, it was just full of bugs, so to the point where, you know, it's almost incredible they even bothered releasing it. But what I've also found is some really interesting resources that are really, you know, kind of pushing the game to keep it alive. Most notably, I found that I can actually run this on my tablet, which is just absolutely amazing. Now it runs a bit slow, so it's not really worth I wouldn't say it's worth doing currently, but I just think it's such a cool thing that basically you can run this quite comfortably from a tablet now. Yeah, and I just, again, I know I keep instilling the virtues of this game, but I think it's just one of those fantastic, I don't know, games that I think just, it looks shit, I agree with it, it looks absolutely crap, but it's just something very addictive about it, particularly when you start to get into kind of later levels. You start to pick up machine guns and lasers and God knows what else, and yeah, it becomes a bit of a, well, it's a true RPG, and you kind of get really immersed into, you know, making the better droid, getting the better armors, and so on. In fact, I think I've always been quite a fan of mobile games. I don't mean games on the mobile, I mean games that you can actually play like on like a laptop or something, you know, low powered. Good examples of this is probably things like Sim Tower. If you've never played Sim Tower, it's actually pretty good. It's pretty it's very two-dimensional literally, but it's actually two-dimensional, I guess, in terms of how you play the game as well. But I guess it's just one of those funny things. I mean, because, you know, again, I've said before, I travel a fair bit, so there are times when I'm sat in some god-awful hotel with, you know, a really shitty minibar that basically just means I want to play a game. So and what I find is I play Captive, I play things like Dwarf Fortress, Sim Tower is obviously a good one, even some of the older Sim Cities, Civilization and that. Just because they're old games, I think, doesn't mean that they're any less valid. You still get the same enjoyment from them, I think. Even things like Civilization is actually a good point, because really it's the same game over and over, just different levels of the UI and the overlay. So, you know, to be honest, there's not a great deal of difference between them. So I'm a big fan of games that really you can kind of just take with you and play anywhere. And you know, things like Crysis 2. I mean, when Crysis 2 came out, it was, you know, brilliant game, but again, you know, you need a real super PC to play it to get, you know, the full graphical enjoyment from it. And, you know, I can understand why that's kind of bigger, better, faster, stronger sort of stuff. But I still think there is something to be said about, you know, games that are just simple. And again, Minecraft maybe is a great example here, because, you know, it runs on pretty much anything, and you can basically get enjoyment for it. It's one of those games that I think, you know, costs you maybe £10-15, maybe even less now. But to be honest, the amount of hours and enjoyment it will give you is, I mean, you know, if you convert that to the ratio of enjoyment to money, I mean, God, it's incredible. Which is good, because that's really what it's about. Games are an entertainment source, and I think there's nothing worse than buying a game for, say, £30-40, or, you know, 60-70 bucks, And frankly, you play it for, I don't know, a month? No, not even that. Maybe sometimes I've completed games in a couple of days and then put them straight back on the shelf or just remove them from Steam or whatever. And, you know, while it was maybe fun, you really do have to sort of say, well, there's a really poor kind of, you know, monetary value to entertainment there. And that's, I think, something that, you know, I'm really kind of key. It's a really key thing for me when I play with games is you want to play something that's got, I guess, you know, a pretty high ratio of money you pay to the enjoyment you get. This is why I think certain MMOs are quite good. Obviously, I've played Eve for like almost 10 years now. And I think Eve is one of those games that, you know, I mean, I've probably paid huge amounts of money before I started to actually just use ISK to subscribe. But I just think, you know, it's one of those things that doesn't really cost a great deal, but the level of enjoyment and entertainment you get from it certainly is good for money. It's good value for money. So I think certainly with some of the old PC games, they do kind of stack up when you know, take it from a kind of financial point of view, because, you know, most of them are even abandonware now, so they're actually free. And you know, with all of the games that were ever made, there is still a good, you know, collection of gems out there that are now free and actually, you know, will give you, again, hours of entertainment, much like Captive is doing for me. I've probably played this for a week now, quite solid, and I've loved it. It's been, you know, really quite enjoyable. And there are other games as well, like, you know, linked to this that are just, you know, very enjoyable, but and they're even technically now free. So, you know, if you're one of these kind of skeptics who maybe doesn't see the benefit of using abandonware or DOSBox or old games, you know, give it a try. I think, you know, I mean, I'll go through some more videos over the next few months where maybe we look at some of the more retro games that are pretty cool, and Sim Tower is definitely one of them because it does become quite an addictive game. And I think things like even Dwarf Fortress, it's entirely free if you can get past the graphical interface, or if you use a tile pack. It becomes, well, probably one of the best management games you'll ever play because it's so deep and it's entirely free. And there's many others, so I think, you know, it all just takes a little bit of a kind of open mind to play some of these games. But you know, that's part of the choice, isn't it? And I think certainly with, you know, when you look at the indie market now, particularly on Steam, a lot of these games are just being repackaged into you know, new skins and then released to you know, as part of an indie bundle and so on. So, you know, I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there's also scope just to to go back to the old games like this, which, again, I know they don't look great, but the level of detail and enjoyment you get from it is pretty good. What I'll probably do is include a link to maybe some of the websites I use to get some of these older games, because, I mean, I'm just looking at my folder now, and you know, there's some real classics in there, even stuff like Beneath the Steel Sky. I mean, they're talking about maybe doing a remake of that, or even a sequel or a prequel currently, and, you know, these are really good games. Planetscape Torment was, again, another good game, and just many more. I mean, you know, I think really, you know, there's some really good games out there that just basically rehash and release you know, to the public. And maybe a good example here is Fragile Allegiance, or Fragile Alliance, maybe as I called it, where basically this was the game K240 on, I think, the Amiga a long time ago. And it was this game where basically it's in space, you're actually working as a corporate entity within an asteroid field. And the idea is that you're basically there to mine resources, to build up bases, to build fleets, to build missile defenses. And the game, much like Captive, had so many levels. You know, you could go and spy, you could build satellites, you could research, and you could build, you know, huge fleets and basically go and beat up aliens. And I think, again, the diversity of the game is well written. There was a great backstory. There was a lot of detail in there as well. So it became a very kind of engaging game. I may do some videos of it, actually, but it's one of those games I'm having real trouble getting to actually work. It works fine, but I can't fraps it, so I need to figure out what on earth's going on there. But again, you know, it's one of those games you put on a laptop or a netbook, and, you know, even a tablet, and you can basically just sit and basically have some fun with it, you know, anywhere. And I think that's particularly what I love. I love the remote or the mobile nature of certain older games that now work just amazingly well on technology such as tablets, which, you know, I've always thought was a pipe dream, really. But now when you think about it, I mean, when I flew to New York recently, and on my my tablet I actually had Elite believe it or not, one of the old versions of Elite. It was unplayable. You'd need a keyboard probably to play it, but it was just it was a fancy. It was quite a nice kind of thing to do, and it was a little bit difficult with the touchscreen. But again, fantastic. And it was an old game converted to new technology, and it was just brilliant. So yeah, I thought it was really enjoyable, and that's very much certainly what I'm kind of interested in at the moment when it comes to gaming. Is not necessarily Call of Duty Black Ops 2, not necessarily stuff like Deus Ex 2 and all that, which I've played, and great games, and and they're fun, but it's more kind of the obscure stuff that I just think is certainly free, certainly fun, and pretty enjoyable as well. So I know it's showing my age, but I think it's just a fun part of gaming is that you should have a broad range of games that you play. I mean, as a hobby, and this is funny because I get the mick taken out of me a little bit when I talk about gaming, but all my life I've gamed, and even from a very young age, I think my father bought an Acorn Electron home, and it was just it was like this incredible technology had descended, so it just became something that really I think has always been part of my life. So this is why I think particularly why I'm doing this channel, is that I really have a kind of passion for every kind of game you could possibly play. So I don't dismiss the big stuff, because there's some fantastic Hollywood style games out there right now, but I think there's also some incredible indie development. There's also some really lost gems that basically are still perfectly serviceable and enjoyable games, and that's really what I wanted to do with this channel, is more just, I guess, vlog what I play, and certainly some of the games out there that are worth looking at, because there's certain games I've always heard about and maybe never played, and I think that's a shame, because you should always try and enjoy everything. I guess it's like music or film or even wine. You kind of try different things, don't you? And it's all about finding what you like, finding what you don't like, and so on. And I think that extends not just from the PC, but also into things like consoles, because again, I think it's maybe not a very well publicized thing the consoles do, but they really are picking up the the more obscure kind of indie development games. I suspect it's because there's maybe a larger user base. Maybe please correct me if you think that's wrong, but I think more people play consoles for gaming, obviously, than they use PCs for gaming. Again, I may be wrong, but certainly when you look at the way Steam's operating, everything that's pretty much on Steam is now appearing on Xbox and PlayStation 3, and I'm sure the Wii as well. So you're seeing this kind of multi-platform approach to everything, which obviously starts to limit the technology, because I think a lot of the consoles are kind of old technology now. But I think that's kind of a moot point, because if there's still a serviceable requirement, if there's a market there, then basically people are going to buy it. So I think that's why it's certainly interesting looking at what the PC and then the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox are doing when it comes to old games. And I'll give you an example here of Doom. I may have mentioned Doom before, but Doom on Xbox is just so much better than it is on the PC, and I think that's because you're not having to go through DOSBox, you're not having to go through any emulators, you're really just playing the game almost raw, I would say. And that's maybe the problem, and that's certainly why in the Xbox it works a lot better, because it's just a very fluid game, plus the controller actually ironically makes it a bit easier to play, which is a bit strange, I know, but and that's, I think, really kind of the irony of this whole thing, is that I think the consoles could end up being the savior of the old PC game. So this is why I find it slightly ironic, but I can certainly see why consoles are really becoming the go-to place for these older games. And Doom is an example there, but even down to things like the old Civilization games are now being released on PlayStation or Xbox, and that's quite an incredible thing, really, when you think about it. So you can see here we've now upgraded some of our droids. You'll see that we've now got the new level of armor, the Coppertron, making it look like a very dashing C-3PO. Copyright infringement, I'm sure, but there we go. And so basically what I'm doing here is I'm just arming my front guys with this new armor, just because it's a little bit better. This is the thing about the game. I mean, it's incredible to think that he built such levels of detail into this, because I think there's something like 8 or 9 different levels of armor that you buy. But I'm actually already at this point by the middle, at the middle of the first campaign, and I can't believe many people played beyond the first campaign. So you've got to love the fact that he really did put the effort into building that detail in, you have to give that certainly some respect. And I think by this point as well, starting to get towards the end of this level, almost towards the generators. So certainly don't need the satellite, I don't think. But I'll probably go and get them anyway, because it's always good just to have spare. I was reading actually about the certain bugs actually that mentioned at the start of the video. There's funny actually, because the way most of the levels, if not all, I think the levels are actually produced is random. So they actually have a map generator that builds the map, and it builds the various things such as the shops, it builds the generators, it builds the scientists, the security gates, and then the security guards, and all the encounters. And I think they did that obviously because to have actually preset all of the levels would have cost too much space on the disk, and this was released on a 1.4 megabyte floppy disk, bear in mind. So having that algorithm, and I know I've spoken about it before, but I think having that made it such a kind of huge game, and I'm just surprised that maybe we don't see that too much now. And I know one of the flaws of it was that actually I think way further into the future of playing this game, if you played it for like a year, you would eventually get to a level that I think the code breaks down and it actually doesn't work, so the level can't be completed. So that's and that's only on the PC version, but it's fascinating that again that's certainly how they seem to have built their game, which I like. I think there's a lovely character to that, and even though you can't, there's no end to it, you just keep playing. I think Captive really was a kind of the beginning, I guess, of the game that never ends, and you play it until your stamina gives out or you get fed up of dying. You can just see there I bought a shotgun as well, so you can see now we've got a rifle. Rifles shoot high, so when you shoot you see the bullets kind of towards the ceiling. Again, interesting mechanic, quite like it. I think it's got a charm to it. But yeah, I think that's that's part of the game really, is that you had this complete randomness. Some levels I think were very similar, so I think maybe at the first 5 or 6 maybe were actually established generated, but certainly after that, because this is slightly older footage, I've actually been playing for quite a while now, so I think the next video I'll release will be way in the future. It'll be actually much further on than this point, and I think you'll see that it's a kind of randomized state where you could be following a path and you could be going through doors, security barriers, and then you just end at a dead end, and you think, well, what's the reason? So you start thinking, well, there's a secret here, but there isn't. It's just the way the thing's built, and I guess there's a real charm to that, because if you play if you play RPGs, you assume that around every corner of every house in the dustbin is going to be a rare find or something like that, and that's kind of, I guess, the preconception of these kind of games, and that's why I like Captive and such games like it, because it's completely random. There is no logic to it at all. And again, maybe we need more games like that, because I think you become set in that mind of the game, the mechanics, therefore there's not really much challenge. So I mean, particularly when I played Deus Ex, that in every map there's going to be 2, 3 or 4 different routes you can take to get into the building to then assassinate or persuade the target, blah blah blah. And I love it, don't get me wrong, but I just think it's very, very what's the word, I think it's very predictable, and I think that's a shame really when you come to play a game, is that you maybe want to be surprised a bit, and there's a few games out there that I think do actually surprise you. But a lot of them feel like, quite frankly, rail shooters now. They're just a linear games that you just generally play. You get the illusion of choice, but you never actually get the real, obvious actual ability to choose anything, and that's a shame. But then again, I think it'd be so difficult to, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Damocles, which is this just massive almost the size of a solar system. In fact, it was a solar system with something like 8-9 planets. Each planet had cities, each city had buildings, and you could fly anywhere. I mean, literally, you were just given a ship, that's it, go and solve this issue. And the issue is a meteorite was about to hit the main populated world of this solar system, and you had to find out a way how to avoid it. And hence it was called the Sword of Damocles. And it was incredible because there was actually very little guidance on what to do, and it was almost like a detective thing where you had to find a way to do it. Now, that as an example, the graphics were pretty terrible by today's standards, but if you took that engine and wrapped it up with a nice looking UI and a very simple engine, you would have just a bestseller. Because if you think, you know, like you get freedom in games like Deus Ex, Damocles and all of the mercenary games were hugely free form and open, and I think they would just put a lot of these modern games to shame. But having to, you know, you have to then, you know, kind of balance that with the fact that a lot of gamers just don't have the patience to do it. So I think a lot of gamers, you know, I'm not going to say they're stupid, but I think a lot of gamers are just kind of like pick up the game, play it, oh, I don't know what I'm going anymore, and then they walk away. And I think that's a shame, because you kind of restrict, I guess, the detail. Anyway, there we go. That's level 4 finished. I've ranted for long enough, so I haven't really talked much about captive, so I'm sorry about that. But basically what we're doing here is just firing off the last few droids, and we can see now where our next base is going to be. And that's we go. So hope you enjoyed that, and talk to you next time.